I think you're in the second seat, right? Or no? Nope. Yeah, okay. So you want to grab, I think, but that's yours? Wireless. That's mine if you want. That's yours, yeah.
You can have it. The anchors, if you do a hit on input board too, it's John's.
My father was very No, I
Yeah, the kids with the tiny mic. She'll be like the kid anymore. It's like the Gen Z. Is that right?
I'm sure at least one Rochester is
Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry for a very long 2 minutes. Apologize for that. I'm aware. I know. Apologies. Okay. Tomorrow, President Biden and the First Lady will travel to Fort Myers, Florida, to reaffirm his commitment to supporting the people of Florida as they recover and rebuild from the devastating storm. While there, the President will meet with small business owners and local residents impacted by Hurricane Ian and thank the federal, state, and local officials working around the clock to provide life-saving assistance, restore power, distribute food and water, removing debris, and begin rebuilding efforts. Governor DeSantis, the FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell, and other state and local officials will also provide the President with an operational briefing on the current response and recovery efforts. This morning, President Biden spoke with President Zelensky to underscore that the United States will never recognize Russia's purported annexation of Ukrainian territory and will continue to support Ukraine as it defends itself from Russian aggression. President Biden informed President Zelensky that the United States is providing a new $625 million security assistance package to Ukraine as they continue to defend their country from Russia's invasion. Together with our allies and partners, the United States has been delivering an unprecedented amount of weapons and equipment that Ukraine's forces are utilizing very efficiently, including to retake their territory that has been seized illegally by Russia. This security assistance package is the 22nd utilization of presidential drawdown authorities for Ukraine by the Biden administration, and we thank Congress for providing the additional authorities in the continuing resolution to make this possible. Today's package includes 4 HIMARS, 32 howitzers, 200 mine-resistant vehicles, and hundreds of thousands of rounds of artillery and mortar ammunition. Throughout this year, the United States has rallied the world to support the people of Ukraine as they defend their freedom and democracy against Russian aggression. As we are demonstrating again today, the United States will continue to provide Ukraine with key capabilities to meet their evolving battlefield requirements. Also this morning, as you may have seen, Micron announced that it will invest $20 billion this decade and up to $100 billion over the next 20 years in chips manufacturing in upstate New York. This announcement is just the latest historic investment in America, spurred by President Biden's economic plan and his commitment to rebuilding American manufacturing. Micron's multi-billion-dollar investment in American chip making will strengthen our nation's economy and create up to tens of thousands of good-paying jobs. In fact, Micron estimates they will pay an average salary of more than $100,000 per year. This is the latest in a series of historic business investments across the country, from New York to Ohio, Idaho, Arizona, North Carolina, and more. And they show the value in the President's work to rebuild our infrastructure and supply chains here at home so that we are creating jobs and bringing down prices over time by making more in America. Today marks 100 days since the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision, and President Biden and Vice President Harris are convening the second meeting of the President's Task Force on Reproductive Health Care Access. This morning, we released a report from Jen Klein, who directs the Office of Gender Policy Council, to the Vice President and Vice President on the onslaught of radical and dangerous actions from Republican officials since the Dobbs decisions. That includes, of course, Senator Graham's proposed national abortion ban, and in Arizona, a court decision to reinstate an extreme abortion ban that sends Arizona women back to 1864. As a result of these actions, millions of women are facing barriers to critical health care, and doctors and nurses are facing criminal penalties, including being thrown in jail for providing that essential health care. These extreme abortion bans also have consequences that extend beyond abortion, including reports of women being denied prescriptions at pharmacies to treat miscarriage and conditions like arthritis and cancer, and threats to contraception, including for college students as well. In today's task force meeting, the President and Vice President will hear directly from healthcare providers across the country about the impact that abortion bans are having on their work, and they will also be clear that the only way to fully protect a woman's right to choose is for Congress to act by codifying Roe into law. Finally, a note on junk fees. Last week, at the White House Competition Council meeting, President Biden put a spotlight on so-called junk fees. He explained that too often, companies impose hidden or surprise fees that prevent customers from seeing the full price of what they're buying and hit the most vulnerable Americans the hardest. The president highlighted progress that agencies have already made to address these fees, which will lower costs for American families by over $3 billion this year. And we're pleased to share that the Biden-Harris administration has now delivered even more results for consumers. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau issued a new order requiring Regions Bank to pay nearly $200 million for illegal surprise overdraft fees, including refunding $141 million to consumers, paying $50 million penalty, and stopping the illegal charges going forward. With that, Colleen, you want to kick us off?
Sure, thank you. Has the White House given any more thought to a public health emergency regarding women's reproductive health, especially as the sort of effects of abortion bans extend beyond abortion to miscarriage and other aspects of women's reproductive health?
We don't have anything to announce at this time, but as you are aware, we have made this a priority, the president and the vice president, especially while we're seeing these extreme laws. We see that the national bans from Republicans, the president and vice president are doing everything in their power to protect women seeking abortion, their right to travel to states that provide care, their right to medication and contraception, and their right to patient privacy. Look, we've taken a range of actions to ensure access. As you know, we've taken some executive actions very early on, and today you'll hear from the president and vice president on what the additional actions that we will be taking. But we have been very clear. You heard that in the beginning of the briefing and what I just said. We are going to continue to encourage Congress to codify Roe. That is how we believe women's rights will be protected.
One more question about oil prices. They're up today on the expectation that OPEC Plus is going to cut production by an estimated 1 million barrels a day. Would a production cut endanger global supplies, and how does the president intend to respond?
So just to be very clear here on that piece, we're just not going to comment on any OPEC action until OPEC acts, as you all know. In any event, we will continue to take steps to protect American consumers. Our focus, and it's been very clear for the past several months, has been on taking every step to ensure markets are sufficiently supplied to meet demand for a growing global economy. And thanks to this president's efforts, and his historic actions that he has taken, energy prices have declined sharply from their highs, and American consumers are paying far less at the pump than they were several months ago. And it's because of the historic steps that this president has taken.
Thanks, Karine. Is there, given the 100 days out from the Dobbs ruling, is there a concern in this White House and the administration that this issue is falling in terms of top importance issues that voters are going to be voting on come to the midterms, given that we're now seeing these polls that show that it ranks below the economy, below inflation?
So I want to,
calendar moves forward.
As you can imagine, I want to be very careful on how I talk about polls and how I talk about. I cannot speak to elections. What I can speak to is this was, if you think about Roe v. Wade, and if you think about how it was a constitutional law for almost 50 years. It protected women for almost 50 years. And in June, when the Dobbs decision was made by the Supreme Court, it took away nearly 50 years of protections for women. And we have seen women respond. We have seen Americans respond just across the country on different initiatives, clearly, and they have been made their voices very loud and clear. And so I expect that we continue to see that type of reaction. We will continue to see, not just from women, but from Americans speak up. And what we have encouraged, what the president has continued to encourage, is to make sure that we get Congress to act. The way that we protect women, the way that we protect privacy, the way we protect contraception, the way that we protect health care for women, and for women to make these decisions. These are difficult decisions that women are making, that they should be making for themselves with their health care provider. No one else should be making that decision. No Republican official, no Republican official in their state or nationally. And so we're going to continue to make that very clear.
And then quickly on North Korea, we're seeing a record number of launches this year. This fifth test is just over the week. What's the White House assessment on why this seems to be ramping up? And then in terms of a response, when a similar missile strike happened in 2017, you saw then President Trump send these supersonic bombs. Could you walk us through the difference in the response approach from this administration to the last?
So since this is the first time I'm being asked this question, I want to lay out just a couple of things here. As we noted in our statement last night, we strongly condemn Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK's dangerous and reckless decision to launch a long-range ballistic missile over Japan. The launch was a danger to the Japanese people, destabilizing to the region, and a clear violation of the United Nations Security Council resolutions. The United States will continue its efforts to limit the DPRK's ability to advance its prohibited ballistic missile and weapons of mass destruction programs, including with allies and UN partners. As it relates to our response, last night, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Secretary Blinken spoke with their Japanese and Republic of Korea counterparts. This morning, President Biden spoke with Prime Minister Kishida of Japan, where he reinforced our ironclad commitment to Japan's defense. And following this launch, U.S. Marine Corps fighters joined Japan Air self-defense fighters in a bilateral exercise over the sea of Japan's to enhance operational readiness and responses to regional threats while defending our nations and to further strengthen regional peace and stability. Additionally, just to add here, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command and Republic of Korea ROK personnel conducted a bilateral exercise as well over the West Sea to showcase combined deterrent and dynamic strike capabilities while demonstrating our nation's bilateral interoperability. We will continue to coordinate the immediate and longer-term response bilaterally, trilaterally, with the Republic of Korea and with the international community. So we have been talking to our counterparts, taking bilateral, trilateral actions over the last 12, 20 hours or so, and so we'll continue to do that.
Thank you, Karine. Just a quick follow-up on that. Was there sort of any consensus that was reached on how to grapple with these missile launches, considering we've been seeing them consistently? And, we understand that the president had this conversation and Jake had this conversation, but is the sense that the White House is just sort of resigned to continuing to let these launches take place, or, are there specific sort of points of action that you can share?
Well, I just laid out points of actions that we have taken, these bilateral actions. So certainly we are taking we're taking this very, very seriously, for sure. And we have commented, as you know, and you've heard us comment on any missiles that have been launched over the last several months. Look, our position, though, on this is diplomacy and dialogue remain the same. That has not changed. And so this action underscores the urgent need for dialogue and diplomacy. We understand that, and that's what we have been calling for. Our goal remains the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. We remain prepared to engage in serious and sustained diplomacy to make tangible progress towards that end, and we remain prepared to meet with the DPRK without without preconditions. You've heard me say this multiple times from this podium over the last several months, and it's unfortunate that the DPRK has not responded to our outreach. But again, we are committed to our allies. I just laid out what we have done in the past several hours to show that commitment, and that's how we're going to continue to move forward.
And do you think, this missile launch was sort of a direct response from North Korea to the Vice President visiting the DMZ recently?
Look, I'm not going to get into the hypotheticals or get into the mind of the North Korea leader. I can just lay out our response to this current, most recent missile launch, and again, our commitment to our partners in the region.
Just to follow up, I think, on both of those to some degree, understand what the actions that the U.S. and its allies have taken, but do you guys have an assessment? There's a lot of general theories as to why there's been kind of a rapid escalation over the course of the last several months. Do you have an assessment as to the why? What are they looking for? What do they want? What is the administration's view of the goal behind these escalations?
I'm not going to get into any assessments from here. Clearly, that is something that we are always keeping a close eye on. What I can speak to is our response and our continued efforts to limit the DPRK's ability to advance its ballistic missile and weapons, and that's what we are going to continue to move forward. Again, I laid out our response. I'm not going to get into analysis or specifics as to the why.
Okay. And then on Iran, there's been a notably different posture from the administration this time around with the protests when compared to 2009 and those protests. Obviously, there's already been sanctions. The president kind of telegraphed more sanctions potentially coming in the days ahead. What is the objective here for the United States? Is it to stop the protest crackdowns? Is it to have Iran change the laws that are being protested right now, or is it regime change? What's the kind of goal here?
So what our purpose is, and you've heard from the president, you've heard from me, you've heard from the National Security Advisor at this podium and on various networks, is that we stand with all the citizens of Iran who are inspiring the world with their bravery. And we will continue to stand with them. That's how we see our role here. Women and men in Iran should have the right to freedom of expression and assembly. Women should be able to wear what they want, free from violence or harassment. Iran must end its use of violence against its own citizens simply for exercising their fundamental freedoms, their fundamental rights. We will continue to take action to hold Iran officials accountable and support the rights of our Iranians to protest freely. We have, just last week, we laid out the actions that we were taking, making sure that Iranians had access to the internet as the government was stopping that freedom to access their right to global internet. We took actions there, and we'll have more this week. You'll hear from the United States on what will be imposing further costs on those, how we will be imposing further costs on those perpetrators of violence against peaceful protesters, and we'll continue to hold Iranian officials accountable.
But there's no goal to elevate the protests to create perhaps instability in the regime or anything?
Well, we see our role of making sure that we show our support and stand with the citizens of Iran at this time. And as you have seen from our actions, that we are taking this very seriously, and you'll hear more this week.
I wanted to ask about the status of Brittany Griner's release. As you know, the Russian court has set a court date for her. But this offer has been on the table for months now. Is there any sort of movement to get her released? And is there any sort of deadline that the administration can propose to get some kind of movement on this?
So let me first say that we are aware of Russia's announcement that Brittany Griner will be forced to undergo another sham judicial proceeding. She should be released immediately. As we have said many times, Brittany Griner and Paul Whelan have been wrongfully detained by Russian authorities. President Biden, who met with, as you all know, their families about 2 weeks ago right here in the White House, is continuing to direct his administration to engage with Russian government through every available channel and make every effort to bring them home. That is a commitment that he has made. As I have said many times, it is again a commitment that he has made on their particular negotiations. But we want Russia. What we will say is that we want Russia to take the offer that we have put on the table, a substantial offer, as you've heard us say many times, seriously. And if not, or they could make a serious counteroffer, but they need to make a serious counteroffer. But again, the president has demonstrated that he is willing to go to extraordinary lengths and make tough decisions to bring Americans home, as he did just over the weekend to bring home all of the Americans designated as wrongfully detained in Venezuela. So this is a commitment that he has made to the American people, and this is a commitment that he has made to their families.
You were saying, and if not, then what? I mean, for her family that's been waiting for this for months, and Russia hasn't made any indication that they're accepting this deal. I mean, what else can the administration do to apply?
So I just laid out that they should take this offer, the substantial offer that we've put on the table seriously, or make a serious counteroffer. But we need to see a serious counteroffer on this. Look, the president has demonstrated many times during his administration how seriously he takes this, how seriously he takes Americans who are wrongfully detained. We have seen this just over the weekend. We saw this with Trevor Reed. We have made sure that we have taken every step possible to make sure that we bring these Americans home. And so that commitment continues, that commitment stands. And so we're not going to negotiate in public, as you've heard us say many times, but we're going to continue to have those discussions with Russian authorities through the available channels that have been provided to us.
And then a quick question on abortion rights and access. The administration's position has been that Congress needs to act, but that is just completely unrealistic. I know the president has supported changing the filibuster rules to allow for a vote, but even, there isn't support in the Democratic caucus for changing those rules. Has the president been talking to kind of holdouts on the filibuster about this? Has he been talking to Republican senators who have their own proposal on abortion access? At what point is the administration saying that Congress needs to act, but is the administration being realistic about what the dynamics on Capitol Hill are? Even if Democrats were able to gain seats, it still wouldn't be enough.
Right, and he's also said that the American people need to make sure that their voices are being heard. That is also an important piece of Congress acting. The American people have a say here. They have a say on what happens next on this issue. And so the president has been very clear on that. I have to be very careful in how I speak about the next couple of weeks because I can't speak about elections from here. But he's made that very clear in every speech that he's made about this particular issue, about codifying Roe. And it is, yes, Congress needs to act, but also American public have an important role to play here. They can make their voices heard on this issue by making sure that they do what we've been seeing across the country, especially on issues that have been put on Roe on the ballot. And you've seen just record amount of women come out and say, no, we are not going to allow this to happen. I just want to be very careful of how far I can go here. But again, this is something that the American people have a say in as well.
Hey, Karine. One more for me on North Korea. You've laid out a number of the bilateral and trilateral conversations that are happening at all levels of the government with our allies in the region. In the past, we've seen that China is often a useful interlocutor in terms of dealing with the North Koreans. Is there any outreach at this stage to some of our Chinese counterparts to try to maybe see if there's a way they can be helpful in the situation? And do you have an update on whether the president might be meeting in person with President Xi at the G20?
As you know, the president has has had multiple conversations with President Xi, and we've read out all of those phone conversations. We don't have a meeting to lay out or preview for all of you in the next coming weeks or by the end of this year. When we do, we certainly will share that. Don't have any other conversations with the Chinese government to share at this time as well.
And then on the president's call with President Zelensky, there was an announcement along with that of additional security assistance to the Ukrainians. I'm wondering how Ukraine's success on the battlefield of late is factoring into decisions within the administration about potentially accelerating this delivery of assistance to try to press the advantage now, and how that's being calibrated with the threats we're hearing from the Russian side about potential nuclear or retaliation in this situation. Is that sort of a push and pull that's factoring into our decision making on this?
So, we always say nothing without Ukraine, no action on Ukraine without Ukraine, right? That is something when it comes to any type of diplomacy or conversation that's being had, that certainly they have to be in the room for that piece. And look, when it comes to the potential nuclear threat, we have been very, very clear about that. We take any nuclear weapons or nuclear saber rattling very seriously here. But I do want to say, that we have not seen any reason to adjust our own strategic nuclear posture, nor do we have indication that Russia is preparing to imminently use nuclear weapons. What you're seeing, the $600 million that we announced today of security assistance, is just a continued commitment that we have showed to Ukraine, because as you all know, they are fighting. The brave people of Ukraine are fighting for their freedom. They're fighting for their sovereignty, and so this is something that we believe, not just the U.S., our allies and partners around the world see this as an important partnership that we have to make sure that Ukraine is able to do that. And so, as we have seen their successes on the battlefield, as we have seen them take back even territory that was supposedly annexed just a couple days ago, we're seeing them have those gains and taking back their own territory. And so we're going to continue to make sure that we are there for the Ukrainians. That's why you heard we did the readout of the president's call with Zelensky, saying that we are going to continue to be there and be in partnership with them, and also give them a heads up of what we're going to provide, and making sure that they continue those successes on the battlefield. Look, this is important. This is very serious. When you're talking about a country's democracy, when you're talking about a country's freedom, it is important for us to be there and stand with the Ukrainian people, and that's what you're going to continue to see.
And one last question for me. You mentioned the president will be meeting with Governor DeSantis tomorrow as part of his trip to Florida. They've met in person in the past when he was visiting Surfside as well. Both of those conversations were above politics, focused on the tragedies at hand. But I'm wondering if the president will look for an opportunity behind the scenes privately tomorrow to speak with Governor DeSantis about some of his concerns about his actions as it relates to flying migrants into other jurisdictions.
So, obviously the president laid out his concerns and outrage by the political stunt, and by the fact that people were misled. You've heard me talk about this. You've heard the president talk about this, and how they were misled and flown across the country with all kinds of promises that were not true. There will be plenty of time to discuss differences between the president and the governor, but now is not the time. As you've heard from the president, he has said, when it comes to delivering and making sure that the people of Florida have what they need, especially after Hurricane Ian, we are working as one. And so that is what the president is going to be doing when he's there in Florida. He's going to be listening to the people who live there, who have lost so much. He's going to be talking to the respondents on the ground who have done tremendous work. As you know, the FEMA administrator will be traveling with him as well, and they're going to, Governor DeSantis and President Biden, as they have done several times leading up to this day, as Florida's been dealing dealing with this hurricane. They're going to talk about what else are the needs in Florida to get to a place of recovery, to get to a place of rebuilding. But again, this is going to be, as you've said, above politics. You have seen them do this before. When Surfside, I remember you traveled with us when we went to Surfside, when the president and Governor DeSantis listened to the people of Florida who dealt in that community, who dealt with so much lost loved ones. And so that's what you're going to see again tomorrow. And also you saw that yesterday in Puerto Rico. Okay.
Thanks, Karine. You've said the president was responsible for gas prices coming down. Is the president responsible for gas prices going up? So
it's a lot more nuance than that, right? Peter, you know this. There have been global challenges that we have dealt with. When I say all, meaning other countries as well, have dealt with since the pandemic. There's been pandemic and there's been Putin's war. And Putin's war has increase gas prices at the pump. We have seen that over the past several months. And what the president was able to do, he took some historic steps when you think about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and making sure that we were able to do everything that we can to bring that cost down for American families, give them a little bit more of a breathing room. And we saw that. We saw that every day this summer, saving American families over $1 per gallon. And so that is what the president's going to continue to stay focused on, our American consumers. How do we continue to keep prices down? That's why we did the Inflation Reduction Act. That's why we talk about the CHIPS Act. All of these things are going to help Americans here in this country.
And there are consumers now in California paying $6.41 a gallon for gas, Nevada $5.51, Oregon $5.46. Who can afford that?
And we understand that. That's why the president worked so hard the past several months to make sure that he did everything we can to bring gas prices down. We have seen fastest. I know you're pulling out a couple of areas across the country, and I get that, and we understand that there's more work to do. We have never said we were done here. We have always been very clear that there is more work to do, but we have seen, the reality is we have seen the fastest decline in gasoline prices in over a decade. That's because of what this president has done. And again, prices going down by more than $1 per gallon. And these are real savings. You're talking about $100 per month in savings for an average family with 2 cars.
When the president went to Saudi Arabia, he said, I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. What happened?
So I want to be very clear, and we have said that, you know, his trip to the Middle East was not about oil. It was about America's position in the Middle East and consultation with 12 leaders from across the region on a range of issues similar to his summits in Asia or the Americas, and later this year with African leaders. The president's trip was crucial. It was critical to U.S. national security, a more peaceful, integrated region, and for global security. And there were plenty of examples that we laid out to all of you as to why this trip was so important. But aside from that, the president took action. As I just mentioned, he took action these past several months, and every day in this summer, you saw prices take down at the pump. But we didn't just stop there. We saw legislative actions, historic actions that the president took to make sure that we're continuing to create jobs in America. We're continuing to lower prices. So there are multiple actions that this president has taken.
Thank you. Can I follow up on Iran? Does a decision by the CIA director, Mr. Bill Burns, to speak out in support of the demonstrators in Iran was coordinated by the White House? Because as you know, Karine, the CIA directors do not speak often. Mm-hmm. So is this a direct message to the Iranian regime that the U.S. will help the demonstrators?
And can you say that first part about the CIA? I didn't hear that part.
So Bill Burns gave an interview yesterday,
okay,
and he talked in support of the Iranian demonstrators. But was this coordinated by the White House? Because for him to speak, that has weight. So is this a direct message?
But we have been very clear. The president's voice also has weight, right? The president has spoken about his concerns about the intensity of the violent crackdown on peaceful protesters in Iran, again, who are demanding, as you know, their equal rights and basic human dignity. He spoke out about that during the UN during UNGA assembly that we saw, the General Assembly that we saw just 2 weeks ago. He was very clear. You've heard statements from him. You've heard statements from his national security advisor. You've heard statements from me. So as administration, as a holistically, we've been very, very clear. And the president has taken actions. We're making it easier for Iranians to access the internet, including through facilitating greater access to secure outside platforms and services. And we're holding Iranian officials accountable. And so you've seen us take actions through the U.S. Treasury and do our part in making sure that we are supporting the Iranian people.
But my point here that I'm trying to articulate is because he's the head of the CIA.
I hear your question.
But because of that, do you think that the Iranian regime might see that as an interference by the American intelligence, which is often they said this accusation against the administration?
I hear your question, but what I'm saying is we as an administration, the president directly, is speaking out on what we are seeing on the ground. We have concerns. We believe that the Iranian people, women in particular, have the right to their freedoms, and we're going to speak out about that. And I think that's important. You all are reporting this. You all are seeing yourselves what is happening on the ground, and so we're going to continue. We're going to continue to impose further costs on the perpetrators of these violence. And so we're going to continue to speak out. And I think that's the right thing to do. We think that's the right thing to do.
I have two health-related questions. First, on the abortion issue and the Title IX guidance that the Education Department released today. Are there current examples of the types of violations that this guidance is trying to stop?
I don't have any particular examples for you at this time. I would refer you to the agency to ask for specific examples that they can share with you.
Okay. And then last week, the Kaiser Family Foundation released a poll showing that nearly half of adults had heard little to nothing about the COVID booster, despite the efforts by the administration and others to launch for this education campaign this fall to get people to get boosters. Do you have a reaction to this? Are you concerned about it? Are you going to be doing anything else in light of this to try to step up those education and outreach efforts?
So, no, it's an important question to ask. I know Dr. Jha actually spoke to this yesterday and want to give a little bit of context. I know people have had questions on the data specifically on how many people are actually getting this new vaccine. So just to give you a little bit about what we have, we estimated about 10 million Americans got their updated COVID-19 vaccines in the month of September. As Dr. Jha said yesterday, we are off to a strong start with about 10 million Americans with their updated vaccine. It means that in the first 3 weeks of our fall vaccination program, hundreds of thousands of Americans got their updated COVID-19 vaccine each day. And so even with the limited funding, as we have spoken to many times, we're absolutely doing more to make sure we're redoubling our efforts on protecting those at high risk, especially elderly Americans, including through a new paid media campaign and targeted engagement efforts. And within the group, there's been good progress. Almost half of updated vaccines administered so far have gone to those age 65 and older. And in October, we're going to be building on that as well. Next week, we are hoping to have Dr. Jha and also Dr. Fauci here in the briefing room to take your questions clearly on this new vaccination program and how we're making sure that Americans are aware and they know the importance of getting this new vaccine. So you're going to hear directly from the doctors next week and just laying out how critical and how important it is to make sure that they're getting that vaccine, that vaccinated. Hey, welcome to the briefing room.
Thanks so much, Karine. It's great to be here.
Are you sure?
We'll try to make this.
Take your time. We have a lot of time. Take your time. No pressure.
The administration, the White House, is marking the 100 days since the Dobbs Act here. as you're doing that over at the Supreme Court, there are a number of other rights that are going to be on the table this term. I'm thinking about voting rights. I'm thinking about potential affirmative action, Clean Water Act. And this administration received some criticism for for how proactive or how reactionary it was to the Dobbs Act. And I'm wondering if some of those other rights, if the White House is taking proactive action to potentially get prepared for seeing the Voting Rights Act scaled back, or seeing the end of affirmative action in universities.
So I just want to get back to what you were saying about alluding to on abortion and the criticism that we've received there on the Dobbs decision. I want to be very clear, because I think it's important to note, and I've noted it a couple of times, is when the leak of the document happened, we did take action. We did take action in those weeks leading up to the actual decision, and that it was meeting with groups, that was meeting internally, trying to figure out the best way that we were going to take, that we were going to respond if indeed the leaked document at the time during that moment was true. And so I want to be very clear and continue to correct that record here, is that the president has always taken this very seriously when it comes to Roe. He's always taken women's rights and women's ability to make a decision on their own health care. And also he was very clear that what this could lead to, right? This could lead to not just Roe, the Dobbs decision, but it could also lead to marriage equality, contraception. He was one of the first voices that sounded the alarm on what this could potentially, down the path, the dangerous path that the Dobbs decision could take us to. And we're seeing that. We're seeing efforts of that currently from, Republican officials and Republican voices nationally. And they've been very, very clear. So as it relates to this question of the courts, yes, the protections that we have held so dear and near are once again on the line in this term. And we are very clear about that, and we understand what is potentially at stake here. We will continue to do everything within our power to defend fundamental rights from special interests that are bent on destroying them. That doesn't stop us. We're going to continue to speak out on that, and this is, when it comes to people's fundamental rights, fundamental freedoms, this is something that the president and the vice president is going to fight for.
And just to follow up, earlier you talked about how the president knows that the American people will have their say in these matters in a matter of about 5 weeks. I know you can't talk about politics from there, but how much can we expect the president to take that message on the road to the various places in the country where there are key elections, and they will have a voice, and that voice will impact the president's term in terms of his legislative agenda? Well,
look, I can't get into the next 5 weeks and where he's going to be and any of the politics. What I can say very clearly is that, back in August, we put out a memo laying out what this administration was going to be doing in order to speak to how we're delivering for the American people. We talked about the Inflation Reduction Act and what that's going to mean for millions of Americans across the country when it comes to health care, when it comes to Medicare, when it comes to energy costs, when it comes to putting one of the most important investment in fighting climate change. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. We're going to talk about the CHIPS Act. Just gave an announcement on what Micron is doing, the investment that they are bringing into this country, and making sure that we're having a strengthening our supply chain, chip making, which is going to be so important in lowering costs. And so it's not just the president. It's going to be the cabinet secretaries. It's going to be the vice president, and it's going to be congressional members within their districts or senators in their states. And so we laid out that plan on what you were going to see from us. Any specifics on any 2022 specific strategy, I cannot speak to that from here. Okay, Tim.
Thank you. The governor of Puerto Rico yesterday made a very specific ask to extend the 100% disaster funding for 180 days. Is the president considering that? Has he made a decision? Where does that stand, that request?
So that request, I would have to check with the team. Don't have anything specifically on the request that the governor made. I remember hearing that. But you know, one of the things that we want to make sure that came out, and what you all saw from that, from the president and the first lady's visit, is that you saw a president that was committed to making sure that the people in Puerto Rico are not forgotten. That our brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico got the need and the help that they needed to rebuild and to make sure that they were not forgotten. And so that's the takeaway that I would provide to you. The president made a commitment. He made a promise that we will get them back on their feet, and we will be there for the long term. And that's why he made the announcement, if you all remember, on the Puerto Rico grid modernization team, which is going to be coming out of the Department of Energy, which is going to support Puerto Rico in rebuilding its electricity grid so that it is more resilient and secure. The Secretary will work closely with the governor to help address challenges and rebuild the necessary infrastructure, allowing the island to better withstand increasingly stronger storms and natural disaster. The team will work with other agencies, including FEMA, HUD, and Commerce, to coordinate resources from across the federal government and ensure funding is used in an expeditious and strategic manner to best serve the grid and the people of Puerto Rico. And that is going to be our commitment to the people of the island.
Just one quick thing. The president yesterday in Puerto Rico, in addition to getting the briefing, did give public remarks with the governor and others near him. Is he going to be giving like a public speech in Florida as well? And will Governor DeSantis be with him for that, or just for the briefing?
So we know that the governor has a busy schedule as he is dealing with the aftermath of a catastrophic storm, as we also saw for ourselves, and many of you have been reporting on it. So I can't speak specifically to where he's going to be at every step of the day. We will have more to share on what the president and the first lady are going to be doing tomorrow. Okay, Sebastian.
Thank you. Do you have anything on the Russians say that they detained, or actually imprisoned somebody called Robert Gilman, who apparently attacked a police officer over there? So he sentenced 4+ years in prison in Russia. Is this on your radar? Is it seen as another problematic case, or just a regular?
We'd have to check with the team. Don't have anything at this time to share on that particular individual.
Okay. And a very quick one. Did the president tell Al Sharpton he's running? That clearly?
You love asking me, Sebastian. You love asking me about 2024.
Well, did he tell?
Look,
hey, Al, I'm running.
Here's what I will say.
You just want a clear answer. You know, everyone's.
I know you want a clear answer. I know, but he's. If Al Sharpton says it, it's you know. Look, it's so funny. You always ask me about 2024. So here's what I can say, and the president has said this himself. He intends to run in 2024. As you know, I cannot weigh in on elections. I cannot speak to elections from here. We do truly follow and try to follow the Hatch Act here, but I will just reiterate what the president has said many times. What I have said many times is that the president intends to run.
Karine, thank you. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the runoff or release of 1 million barrels a day ends at the end of this month. Is there any conversations about releasing more oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? How's the president going to keep the supply up?
So we're not considering new releases from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve beyond the 180 million, which is what you're speaking about the 1 million that the president announced months ago. We don't have anything more to share, or we're not going to be considering new releases.
Does the president expect gas prices to rise then?
Look, we have been very, very clear that we're going to continue to do everything that we can to give Americans a little bit of breathing room. The decline that you have seen the last several months is historic in many ways because it is the fastest decline in gas prices that we have seen in over a decade. The president's going to continue to do that work, but it's not just gas prices. We've talked about the Inflation Reduction Act and how he's working to make sure we lower cost for Americans, whether healthcare or energy. I just laid out the CHIPS Act and how important that's going to be in lowering costs and also creating jobs right here in America. And so we're going to continue to do that work. but right now we're not considering to be doing anything more with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve.
Thank you, Karine. Is the administration worried that Elon Musk is spreading Russian propaganda?
Can you be more specific?
Well, this weekend he put out this, quote, peace plan that includes giving Russia Crimea and like redoing some of these elections, but with the UN watching. So wondering if there's a concern there.
So we've been very clear about this, and I just said this earlier in the briefing. Anything about Ukraine, we are not going to talk about Ukraine without Ukraine. It is their decision to make when it comes to any diplomacy or negotiations in that regard. And so I leave that to the Ukrainian people. But look, we're going to make sure that we're going to be there for the Ukrainians as they fight for their own for their sovereignty, and that decision about their sovereignty, about their freedom, about their democracy will be made with them.
Sort of slightly different question, but are there concerns about Elon Musk acquiring Twitter?
Any concerns about
Elon Musk acquiring Twitter?
I have not. Have there been something new on that?
Yeah, it's just today.
So we have been very clear on not commenting on any specifics potential transaction from here. So I'll leave it on that. I'll leave it to that. Okay, Kim.
Thanks, Karine. The administration has said Americans would be able to apply for student loan forgiveness beginning early this month. Is the process being held up at all because of the lawsuits that have been brought?
Don't have anything more on that. I think you'll hear more from us, from the Department of Education on that piece, on that implementation process. I think I've laid it out a couple of times here. They sent out some emails last week. But as it relates to the legal pieces, the lawsuits that you're seeing across the country, it's a shame. It's a shame that you have Republicans out there, Republican groups, Republican states that are trying to stop Americans from getting a little bit of a breathing room, a little bit of break. We're talking about 40 million Americans that could benefit from getting student loan relief, and it is shameful that they are siding with the special interests. It's shameful that they're not siding with the American people on this. And let's not forget, 90% of borrowers who are going to be receiving that relief will be making under $75,000. This is a commitment that the president has made. He made it during his campaign, and this is one of the ways that the president is going to continue to work for the American people, trying to find ways to give them a little bit of a break. And let's not forget, the pause is going to lift in December, so people are going to be paying back their loans. And while we're going through that process, he wanted to make sure that folks who were really affected especially by the pandemic, also got that we didn't forget them and give them a little bit of a break as well.
Thank you. A couple quick ones. Last week I asked about Navy Lieutenant Bridge Alconis. I didn't know if you had an update on his case.
Oh, I do not have an update for you on that. I apologize. You did ask me about that.
And then I wanted to ask, the president recently praised a group of Coast Guard rescue swimmers. One of them reportedly faces termination because he isn't vaccinated. And I'm curious, given the threats that we're facing abroad, would the president ever reconsider that vaccination requirement or consider issuing more exemptions?
So, as you can imagine, the president has the deepest respect for the U.S. Coast Guard. That is something that you would hear from him directly, and the president and the country are grateful for all of the U.S. Coast Guard heroes that have led the effort to save lives in Florida. We have seen that with our very own eyes these past couple of days. I would refer you specifically to the U.S. Coast Guard on this issue, on this individual questions. It's not something that I would comment from here, but there, of course, have been multiple vaccination requirements, as you know, in place for quite some time. But again, I'm not going to comment from here on an individual case.
Okay, then a third one. Last week, the president brought up the Italian election unprompted in some remarks, and he seemed to say that the election of the Italian Prime Minister, or I should say the incoming Italian Prime Minister, was part of this larger, greater global struggle between democracies and autocracies. Was the President suggesting that the election of that Prime Minister was somehow part of that larger threat to democracy?
So look, as we have said, and I have said this before, we respect the democratic choice of the Italian people. We have said that, and it's something that we will continue to say. And the United States stands ready and eager to work with the new government that emerges from the electoral process, and to continue to work together as allies to advance our many shared goals and interests, mutual interests, as you know. But I don't have anything further on his comments. I will say, the president views, just in general, more broadly, the rise of the far right as well known, and that is something he's been very clear about. But I wouldn't have anything to add on what he said.
Thank you, Karine.
Thanks. Thanks.
I was calling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. One more on Ukraine. Today, India's Prime Minister Modi had a call with Ukrainian President Zelensky, during which he said about this no military solution to this problem, and they talked about peace and diplomacy. I just wanted to check with you, is there any coordination between India and US on the Ukraine and Russian crisis? Has President spoken to Prime Minister Modi on this?
So don't have any anything to read out on any recent conversation with Prime Minister Modi. But his public comments directly to Putin are very clear. Now is not the time for war. And it's not the time. But he was even more specific to that. He said his war, Putin's war. He was alluding to. Look, Putin is facing further isolation from international communities, as countries make clear. Putin's decisions doesn't have a lot of sympathy ears. He doesn't have a lot of sympathetic ears here on his decision to have this war, on this decision to start this brutal war against Ukraine, a war against their democracy, and so not many people have a sympathetic ear to President Putin. We are asking that countries around the world, and we've been very clear about that, continue to speak out publicly and continue to engage diplomatically on this as well. And so I think that's what you're seeing from the Prime Minister.
One more on last year, President quietly celebrated Diwali at the White House. Diwali is not a festival rights for the Hindus, Jains, and Sikhs. President has appointed large number of Indian Americans in his administration, 130 plus and counting. Large number of them vote for him, support for him. Does the president has any plans to celebrate Diwali with the Indian Americans community leaders in the White House this year?
Yes, he has plans to celebrate Diwali just like he did last year. We don't have a date to share with you at this time, but it is an event that he thinks it's very important, as he sees a partnership with India as well as Indian Americans here in this country.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. On abortion, it's been 100 days since Dobbs. It's been more since the draft leaked. Isn't it fair to say that if the administration saw any significant benefit in an emergency declaration, that it would have happened already?
Look, the administration has taken bold actions for the past several months since the Dobbs decision back in June. And they have made a priority to make sure that we protect women's health the best way that we can from the federal government. They've made that commitment. You've heard from Jen Klein many times here at the podium. She's been at the podium twice, the General Policy Council Director, on the actions that we have taken and how we're going to continue to make sure that we keep that front of mind, making sure that we do not forget the women who are whose lives are now at risk because of the Dobbs decision. So look, at the same time, the president has been clear that the only way to really protect women's health is to codify Roe. And so that is something that you're going to hear from this president today. You're going to hear from the vice president as well. And the vice president has led on this effort. She has met with, I would probably argue hundreds of local officials and has spoken to this across the country and made the voice of the administration very clear on this. So look, we've been very clear. It's limited on what we can do at the federal level. The president has been clear on this. But the way that we get to a solution here, that we make sure that these difficult decisions that women have to make, the potential of contraception being on the chopping block, and privacy and being at risk, and marriage equality being also at risk, as we are seeing from Republican officials and what they're saying and what they're alluding to that they will do next. We have SCOTUS that's back, as somebody was asking me, the actions that they can potentially take. We believe in protecting the fundamental rights and freedoms of Americans, and we're going to do everything that we can to make that happen.
And real quick on gas prices, you alluded to some of the steps that were taken to drive gas prices down. Now that they're going back up, is the White House confident that it has the policy tools remaining to drive those prices back down, or are all the good options essentially exhausted at this point?
So, look, again, we're going to do everything that we can here in the administration to lower costs for Americans. That is going to continue to be a #1 priority, especially as we look at the president's economic plan. We're continuing to release oil from Strategic Petroleum Reserve through November. That has not stopped. That continues. As the president, as we know, announced that this past spring. We're continuing to engage directly with industry to ensure that the private sector is also doing everything it can to build resilience ahead of the coming season. We know winter is here. And on Friday, the president team met with energy companies and emphasized that energy companies with record high profits, record high exports, and record low inventories must step up and bring down the prices at the pump. He's been very clear. You heard him say that last week. The president and his senior team are directly engaged on these issues. And again, it will continue to be lowering prices for Americans a top economic priority for this administration.
Thanks, Karine.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Karine.
Okay.
artillery rounds. Third, 1,000 155mm rounds of remote anti-armor mine or RAM systems. 16 M119 105mm howitzers. 30,000 120mm mortar rounds. And then the last item I want to touch on is 200 Max Pro mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, which provide Ukraine with a resilient capability for transporting troops in heavily mined terrain. This package will provide the Ukrainian Armed Forces with additional capabilities and munitions that it needs to maintain momentum in the east and in the south, including additional artillery and precision fires. Ukraine has demonstrated the ability to use these capabilities to degrade Russian logistics and command and control, creating opportunities for Ukraine to maneuver and to advance. This has created, as Secretary Austin said recently, a change in battlefield dynamics. Even as the Russian government moves legislation today to claim parts of Ukrainian territory illegitimately, the reality on the ground is that the Ukrainian armed forces continue to reclaim territory and to consolidate their gains. The liberation of Lyman was a significant operational accomplishment, and Ukrainian forces continue to make deliberate progress in the Kharkiv region and also further south around Kherson. The Ukrainian counteroffensive in Kherson has made significant advances over the last 24 hours, and Ukrainian forces continue to liberate villages as they press forward. The United States will continue to provide Ukraine with the weapons and equipment to meet its urgent needs on the battlefield, while also building Ukraine's enduring strength to defend its sovereignty over the long term. In total, the United States has now committed more than $17.5 billion in security assistance to Ukraine since the beginning of the Biden administration, including more than $16.8 billion since the beginning of Russia's invasion on February 24th. The United States will continue to consult closely with Ukraine to meet its evolving battlefield requirements, in coordination with our allies and partners, to provide Ukraine with the capabilities it needs. As President Biden has said, the United States will continue to stand with the Ukrainian people and provide them with the security assistance they need to defend themselves for as long as it takes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. As mentioned, Deputy Assistant Secretary Cooper has graciously agreed to answer a few questions about the PDA and Ukraine security assistance. I'd ask that you limit your questions to that topic while she's here, and afterwards, again, I'll stay around to talk about any other questions that you might have. Let's go ahead and start with AP.
Hi. Thank you, Ms. Cooper, for doing this. Two questions. One is, can you address, if possible, specific ways that this most recent package was tailored to Ukraine's apparent battlefield successes, if there's specific elements that were added or taken away because of how Ukraine is doing? And it would also be great if you could address the question of ammunition broadly, of how much Ukraine is short ammunition compared to Russia, and how, there's been a lot of discussion of how they've made selective use of ammunition to make up for the number disparity. But if it's possible to get specific ratios or numbers of how much Ukraine has versus Russia has based on the assessment of the Pentagon.
Great. So first, I would say in terms of how this package responds to what the Ukrainians need, the capabilities that I discussed, these are capabilities that the Ukrainians have received previously and have requested additional capabilities. And it also responds to, in terms of the volume of ammunition that they need on the battlefield today. We're looking very closely at their consumption rates for ammunition to make sure that they have what they need for the counteroffensive, and then the types of capabilities. I think at this point the HIMARS are pretty famous because you've seen how the Ukrainians can use these capabilities to take out critical Russian logistics nodes, command and control nodes, ammunition depots, etc., and really weaken the Russian forces' ability to respond. So having these additional 4 HIMARS is going to enable the Ukrainians and the other capabilities as well to have flexibility in how they employ these capabilities with their forces as they look for additional opportunities to seize the strategic advantage. And in terms of the comparison with Russia, I can't get into specific numbers for you. I would just say that what Ukraine has on its side right now is not just its own capabilities, but the capabilities of all of its allies and partners. And what you're seeing is the United States is providing additional ammunition, but we're also investing in ammunition production, and we're seeing our allies and partners investing in ammunition production. We had Undersecretary LaPlante last week meeting with allies, armaments directors, talking about ways to sustain the industrial base to continue to support Ukraine. Whereas you see Russia, what is Russia doing? Russia is turning to North Korea for assistance. It's turning to Iran. It doesn't have that depth of support.
Thank you. Let's go to Sylvie and then Tom.
Thank you very much. Ukrainian armed forces are consuming every month much more ammunition than the U.S. industry is capable of making every month. So how confident are you that you can help Ukraine as long as it takes, as you said?
So that's where we get into the question of production, and we are confident that we are investing in production. It's ramping up, and we see our allies also ramping up in production. So while, today you see very high rates of consumption of ammunition, but you also see an incredibly high op-tempo on the battlefield as the Ukrainians press forward very successfully. We are increasing production, and we see over time that we will be able to have a sustainable rate, both for ourselves and for the Ukrainians.
Thanks. Let's go to Tom, and then we'll go over here.
Just a quick follow-up on that, and then a second question, Secretary. One is, it seems like there's a balance between how much we're producing to supply, we and the U.S. allies are producing to supply the Ukrainians, as well as their consumption. And we've spoken before about the clock in the sense of seasonal, there's going to be fall and winter coming. Without asking you to project, what the Ukrainians may or may not do tactically, but is there, part of the calculation is that there has to be a slowdown at some point because of Mother Nature that would help production ramp-ups meet the demand of the Ukrainians? And my second question off that, not on that, is announcement on earlier about this drawdown authority mentioned Claymore mines were supposed to go as well, and you didn't mention it. Were they removed from the package?
Sorry about that. Yes, Claymore mines were in the package. Yes, yes, and we've provided. They are in the package, and we have provided those before. Yes, that's correct. Sure, that's correct. Okay. Yes, and in terms of your question about seasonal aspects to the fight, absolutely. Weather plays a big factor in any war, and here what we would anticipate is, as the weather changes, maneuver will be much more challenging. I mean, you get really muddy ground. It of course increases just the challenge to the average fighter, the average soldier, in terms of the impact of the weather on the conditions. Now for us, we know that we have been looking to the Ukrainians for what their needs are for the winter. You've seen allies taking a leadership role in providing winter equipment to the Ukrainian soldiers, making sure that they have what they need to sustain themselves throughout this winter. Before we were talking about ammunition, but cold weather gear is going to be really, really important. But I'm confident that us with our allies are actually meeting those needs. Not as sure about the Russian forces.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to Jennifer Griffin, and then we'll go to the phones.
Yes. Hi. There have been reports that the Russians have a train that might be carrying tactical nukes toward the Ukrainian border. Are you seeing any evidence of that? Is that true?
I've seen these reports. I have nothing to corroborate.
And is there anything that you will be providing to help Ukraine protect themselves against a possible nuclear strike?
Well, here, in terms of protective equipment, we've already provided a considerable amount of protective equipment against chemical, biological, and radiological threats. Going back to, I believe it was our 7th presidential drawdown, we actually provided a number of personal protective equipment items, and we have also had a longstanding tradition of cooperating with the Ukrainians through the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program, and we've provided significant quantities of personal protective equipment through that program.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and go out to the phones here. Phil Stewart, Reuters.
Yeah, thank you. Just to double down on the nuclear issue, could you just give us a bit greater sense of whether you've seen anything to indicate that Russia is contemplating a use of nuclear weapons? And secondly, is there any evidence that's been uncovered so far by the U.S. or its allies as to who is behind the ruptures of the Nord Stream pipelines? Thanks.
Phil, so in terms of the nuclear question, we have certainly heard the saber rattling from Putin, but we see no signs that would cause us to alter our posture in terms of the nuclear piece. And on the pipeline issue, I don't have any new information for you.
Okay, thanks very much. Laura?
Thank you. First, I just wanted to, on the nuclear question, your answer to Jen, you said you'd seen nothing to corroborate those reports about the convoy heading toward the border.
I only have seen the open source reports. I don't have anything else but the open source reports.
Okay, so you're not telling us that you have not been able to corroborate that. Can you just clarify?
I have only the open source reports. I have nothing else.
And just
I'm sorry, I see what you're saying. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then separately on the HIMARS, it's been quite a few weeks, I think, since we've seen HIMARS launchers being transferred to Ukraine. Can you just talk about that decision to send 4 more right now, and how do you balance Ukraine's need for additional HIMARS with our own needs for contingencies?
So with every drawdown package for each equipment item, and HIMARS is just one of them, we look at the readiness implications for U.S. forces, and we are comfortable that we are not incurring any serious readiness impacts in terms of the HIMARS or any other capability in this or any previous drawdown package. And that is something that we will continue to do with every single package. In terms of HIMARS specifically, what we're seeing on the battlefield is that they will be able to use these additional HIMARS, and it'll give them additional operational flexibility. I should mention that I think we always focus on the U.S. HIMARS, and I just want to remind everyone that we're not the only ones providing MLRS systems. Actually, the Ukrainians, in addition to what will now be 20 U.S. HIMARS, there's 10 from allies, and there's 2 more from allies that are on the way.
Okay. Let me go to the back here, and I'll come right back to you. Gordon?
Thanks. As you know, the Ukrainians would like the next level weapon, namely the TACMs. They provide a distance far into other places, particularly Crimea. Can you kind of help us understand what the administration's position is on ATACMs, given what's been said about supporting Ukraine's efforts to restore its territorial integrity, and if there were assurances provided to the U.S. by the Ukrainians on targeting, would that suffice to make that provision?
So in terms of this capability, but again, with other capabilities as well, we're looking at what the battlefield needs are, and it's our assessment that with the existing GMLRS capability that they have on the HIMARS and that we're providing more of with this package, that they can reach the vast majority of targets on the battlefield.
Into Crimea, though, they can't with any of the weapons that have been provided thus far.
We think they can reach the vast majority of targets, including Crimea. And just to be clear, Crimea is Ukraine.
Okay. We'll go out to the phone, and then I'll come back into the room here. J.J. Green, WTOP.
Thank you very much, General, for the opportunity to ask this question. Desney Cooper, what kind of conversations are you having with allies about the concerns that have come up regarding the possibility of Russia's nuclear activity? They've been threatening to do this, and I'm sure you've been talking with allies about this because allies are talking about it independently, but what kinds of conversations have you had with them, and can you share anything about where they go?
Thanks. If I heard correctly, it's a question about consultations with allies on the nuclear threat. And, what I would say to that is, we have continually consulted with allies about the Russia threat, and the nuclear threat that Russia poses is just one aspect of that. And certainly the NATO forum is our premier forum for consultation on these issues. So this has been, a longstanding topic of consultation for us.
Thank you. Let's go to Oren.
2 questions. One on MRAPs. You provided 40 back in August, where there was quite a bit of speculation that it was for a counteroffensive, and now you've just quintupled that. Why? What is it about the MRAP that the Ukraine has found valuable on the battlefield? And then another question. President Biden signed Lend-Lease back in May. It's a new fiscal year. Are there plans to use Lend-Lease in any way to transfer weaponry, or are you sticking with drawdown and USAI at this point?
Okay, so I'll take the Lend-Lease one first. So we appreciate Congress's support for Ukraine with the Lend-Lease legislation. However, right now we're really focused on presidential drawdown and using that as our primary authority for being able to provide equipment directly from U.S. military stocks, because unlike Lend-Lease, it doesn't have any provisions that would require, reimbursement for, say, damaged equipment and that sort of thing. So we're sticking with PDA PDA for now. In terms of the MRAPs, this is just a capability that we think will be useful on the battlefield. We see it as useful for maneuver in the areas that that Ukraine is seeking to retake, and so the time was right for us to increase the total amount.
Okay. We can do a few more. We'll go to Annie.
On nuclear weapons, do you think that if President Putin uses nuclear weapons to Ukraine, then North Korean Kim Jong-un obsession with using nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula will become stronger?
I don't know if you answered that.
I don't think we want to get into hypotheticals. Clearly, we've communicated that there would be consequences for any use of nuclear weapons, but we won't get into hypothetical situations. Thank you. Let me go to Tony.
One nuclear question and one conventional question. What signs is the U.S. looking for to indicate that Russia may launch weapons? You said that we see no signs that would cause us to alter our posture now. What signs are you looking for?
Tony, I'm not going to get into the specifics of our intelligence and warning posture.
Okay. This is the second round of those artillery-launched anti-tank mines. It's kind of interesting.
Yes.
How are they being used? Are they being used to blow up Russian tanks like the Javelin, or to block Russian tank movements, to block off corridors or something? How are they being used?
So you'd have to check with the Ukrainians to get kind of a full sense, but my sense is that they are incredibly useful for being able to block Russian maneuver forces as the Ukrainians are trying to press forward.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Let me just do one out on the phone here. Joe Gould, Defense News.
Hi, thank you. My question is about the precision guided munitions. DoD budget documents have acknowledged that the U.S. is sending Excalibur rounds to Ukraine. Are those the munitions in this package? And then separately on HIMARS, is the number here about Ukraine's ability to absorb them, or primarily about controlling readiness implications?
So on the first one on Excalibur, yes. When I referred to 500 precision-guided 155 millimeter artillery rounds, that was a reference to the Excalibur round. And in terms of the HIMARS, but again, the other capabilities as well. We're looking at what is needed on the battlefield. For drawdown, we tend to look in terms of more immediate timeframes because we know that we can get it there within days or weeks or at most months. So we're looking at what those needs are in that time frame. When we do our Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative packages, like we did last week, where we're actually procuring, then we're looking out at a much longer time horizon and envisioning what the Ukrainians will need on future battlefields to defend themselves.
Thank you. Cognizant of your time, ma'am, so we'll just do one or two more here and then let you go. Buddy?
Thank you, General. Thanks, Matt, for doing this. I have two questions. We're speaking about immediate needs and winter fighting. It is clear that Ukraine have been demanding tanks at the highest level, and they think it's an immediate need. So why hasn't the U.S. and allies met that need so far? And then on the other question is looking to long terms, providing the Ukrainian weapons capabilities, Ukrainian military with the capability they need. Can you address the merits of maybe having centralized mechanism for training, and is this something to be that is being considered right now or not, and why? Thank you.
Great, excellent. So on tanks, we absolutely agree that the Ukrainians need tanks. And, I don't have the breakout of numbers, but, the U.S. has worked with allies to support Ukraine with 1,000 armored tanks and other, armored APCs so far. So we definitely see the need for tanks. The easiest to provide immediately and be immediately deployed on the battlefield are the Soviet-type tanks that the Ukrainians already know how to operate, but more importantly, that they know how to repair and that they have spare parts for. So one of the challenges with introducing other, Western-type tanks is the maintenance and the sustainment piece. And with every single capability we give to Ukraine, or with every capability we encourage our allies and partners to provide, we want to make sure that they have the right maintenance and the right sustainment, and that they're supporting the Ukrainians with being able to do that. Now, on your question about training, so far we have focused. Now, first of all, it's important to note we've been training the Ukrainians since just after 2014, and we're very proud of the training that we have done of the Ukrainian armed forces over the years. But since the invasion, our focus has really been on training them for new equipment, so that those new equipment items that we provide, they can immediately put to good use on the battlefield, whether you're talking, the M777 or the HIMARS or new UASs that we're providing. So that has been our focus, and we have been coordinating that training, and we've been coordinating it with allies via the team, the U.S. and UK-led team in Germany, to make sure that the allies can work together in different locations, and also to reinforce each other's training programs. But certainly, we really welcome additional training that is being provided right now by the Brits. The UK has started a major training program to train at the basic training level, and we'll continue to see how we can evolve our own training program and coordinate with the allies using that central coordination hub in Germany.
Thank you.
Just a point of clarification.
Jennifer and then Qasim, and then we're going to...
Can you rule out that the U.S. was involved in any way on the attacks on the pipeline, the Nord Stream pipeline?
The U.S. was in no way involved.
Qasim, last question.
Madam, question about nuclear. I know that you won't talk about what you see on the ground, and I know that the United States hasn't changed its posture, but to what extent are you concerned that Russians might use tactical nuclear weapons in the battlefield in Ukraine? And also another question, as a general question, what is the biggest lesson that you learned about Russians in this war in Ukraine?
Okay. Oh, that one's really hard. So on the nuclear piece, certainly we always have to take the threat of nuclear use seriously, and so we do. And that's why we are watching very closely, and that's why we do consult closely with allies. But at the same time, at this point, its rhetoric is only rhetoric, and it's irresponsible saber rattling that we see at this point. The greatest lesson about Russia, it's hard to come up with just one lesson, but I think that most of us watching this have been appalled and horrified at the state of the Russian armed forces, from the ground all the way up to the top, in terms of the poor quality leadership, the brutality of the tactics. And with every day, we continue to see this horror unfolding.
Thank you very much for your time today, ma'am. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. So in addition to today's PDA announcement, I do have a few other updates to provide. As you are aware, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea conducted a ballistic missile launch last night that overflew Japan. The United States condemns these actions and calls on the DPRK to refrain from further unlawful and destabilizing acts. In response to the DPRK's ballistic missile launch over Japan, U.S. Marine Corps fighters joined Japan Air Self-Defense Force fighters in a bilateral exercise over the Sea of Japan on October 4th, Japan time. In addition, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command and Republic of Korea personnel conducted a bilateral exercise over the West Sea on October 4th, Korean time. These engagements were taken to showcase combined deterrent and dynamic strike capabilities, while demonstrating the interoperability our nations share. In addition, earlier today, Secretary Austin spoke with his counterparts in Japan and the Republic of Korea to discuss the threats posed by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and their nuclear missile programs, and to reaffirm our mutual resolve to maintain regional stability. The leaders agreed that yesterday's missile launch was a clear violation of United Nations Security Council resolutions and threatened regional peace and security. Secretary Austin also reaffirmed that the U.S. commitment to the defense of Japan and the Republic of Korea is ironclad. We've issued readouts on both of these calls, which you should have already received. The U.S. remains committed to peace and prosperity throughout the region in order to secure a free and open Indo-Pacific. Our commitment to the defense of the Republic of Korea and Japan remains ironclad, and again, we call on the DPRK to refrain from further unlawful and destabilizing acts. I do want to get to your questions, but first I'd also like to provide a brief update on the Defense Department's Hurricane Ian recovery efforts across Florida in support of FEMA. As of this morning, the National Guard had more than 5,198 soldiers and airmen on state active duty from Florida, Tennessee, Louisiana, Mississippi, New York, Washington, Georgia, and Montana. Under the command and control of the dual status commander, Army Guard Brigadier General Sean Boyette, Guard soldiers and airmen are providing route clearing, sustainment support, logistics, security, satellite communications, search and rescue, 32 commodities distribution sites, shelter support to FEMA and other local first responders. The National Guard has 24 helicopters involved in recovery operations and have rescued more than 2,100 people and 50 pets thus far. The Florida Guard also has more than 1,300 ground assets actively engaged, including high-wheeled transports, fuel trucks and wreckers, and 50 rescue boats. More than 180 Guard troops have been airlifted to Captiva, Sanibel, and Pine Islands for security assistance in food, water, and commodities distribution. National Guard support to hurricane recovery efforts in Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina have concluded, but 65 Virginia Army Guard soldiers and 3 helicopters remain activated in state active duty status for potential high water missions in Southeast Virginia. And separately, as I speak here today, Secretary Austin is hosting Pakistan Chief of Army Staff General Qamar Javed Bajwa for a scheduled meeting here in the Pentagon today. This year marks the 75th anniversary of relations between the United States and Pakistan. We will be issuing a readout later today. And finally, on behalf of the DoD Public Affairs team and Secretary Austin, I want to welcome Assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs, Chris Mayer, who arrived on station this week. As the department's senior public affairs leader, he will oversee DoD's media relations and public outreach efforts and serve as Secretary Austin's senior advisor on public affairs and strategic communication. He brings deep communications experience, and we all look forward to his leadership. And with that, I will take your questions. We already went to AP, so I'm going to go to Janie first.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You mentioned about the North Korea launched the missiles. I have 2 questions. Regarding North Korea's continued provocations, is there any immediate military response to North Korea?
Is there any military response to North Korea? Well, as I highlighted in my comments, the United States conducted bilateral exercises with both Japan and the Republic of Korea to, again, demonstrate our solid alliance and our firm commitment to working with one another and to enable interoperability. Thank you.
I have another one. The South Korean government said North Korea had launched medium-range missiles, but today White House National Security and Council is saying that it was the long-range missiles. What is the real? I mean, why are the 2 countries making different announcements about these missile lines?
Yeah, sure. So what I would say right now is that we're still assessing the launch, assessing the missile, and so when and if we're able to provide additional details on that, we'll certainly make sure they get that.
Clear analysis on this. I mean, DoD's.
Again, we're assessing the missile launch, so that's okay.
This is very important because medium range and long range missiles.
No, I understand. Right, I understand. So I mean, the missile overflew Japan, but in terms of the type of missile, the point of impact, the range, all of that's being assessed right now. So I'm not going to have. I'm not going to characterize it. Again, we're going to assess it. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. I'm going to go back here. Yes, sir.
Travis with military.com. Thank you, Pat. I wanted to ask about the hurricane response. I know that this is partly up to the state, but do you have any sense of how long this military assistance is going to be needed, due to the devastation there? And secondly on that, Do you have any sense of how this response compares to responses to other past large storms? I mean, just numbers-wise, is this a particularly large military response, or does it kind of is it similar to other large storms we've seen?
Well, I think, to your last question there, I think every single situation in and of itself, will merit the size and scope of the military response. Certainly in this particular case, given the swath and the destruction that the storm has caused, it's a significant amount of military support to FEMA and to the states. As far as how long this will last, I'd be speculating. Clearly, we'll continue to work, the National Guard, the Department of Defense will continue to work with FEMA, continue to work with the states, and support them for however long it will take. Thanks. Let me go ahead and share the wealth a little bit, and I'll come back to you. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Matt Seiler with ABC. Thank you. I had another North Korea question. What's the Pentagon's latest assessment of the likelihood of North Korea launching a nuclear test? And whatever that assessment is, has it now become more likely from your point of view, given this most recent launch over Japan?
So I don't want to speculate on whether they will or not. As you know, there has been indications in the past that the DPRK is preparing a test site for what would be its 7th nuclear test. If they do such a test, from our perspective, it would clearly constitute a grave escalatory action and seriously threaten regional and international security and stability. Regardless, we continue to work with our Republic of Korea and Japanese partners for all contingencies, and again, would call on the DPRK to cease these type of destabilizing and unlawful actions. Thank you. Ma'am.
Hi, Brandy Vincent from Scoop. One follow-up and then one general question. On those bilateral exercises being conducted right now, when you say demonstrating interoperability between partners, from a technology perspective, what do you mean?
So interoperability, the ability to fly and fight together, is not something that you can just wake up in the morning and do, right? As evidenced by our operations during the counter-ISIS campaign, as evidenced by the current effort in Ukraine, our ability to work and fight and deter alongside our partners is critical in terms of deterrence, demonstrating that we do have the capability to fight together when and if we need to. And so these exercises are an opportunity for our military members to work together to exercise those capabilities, to one, send a message that we are prepared, and two, that if we need to fight, we can, and we can do it together. Thank you.
Just really quickly, the classified version of the NDS was sent to Congress in March, and we've been waiting for an unclassified version since then. Last week, the President's coordinator for defense policy said that we could expect an unclassified version coming out soon. What does the timing look like on that?
It would probably be a huge mistake for me to give you time from this podium. All I can say is that when we have something to announce, we will announce it.
Keeping it, why hasn't it been released?
Well, first there has to be the unclassified national security strategy released, and then after that, then we'll be in a position to release the national defense strategy, the unclassified version.
At the same time, national security strategy.
Again, I'm not going to sit here and do action officer work at the podium, but thank you very much. All right, let me go back over to Kevin.
Hi, General. Kevin Barron. I'm a friend of Gordon Lubolt's.
We've met before.
I have a question on Mike Pompeo has come out with a series of new ads through his PAC on wokeism in the military, and part of a political conservative accusation that wokeism is affecting recruiting, among other things here. Is the Pentagon doing anything to dig into this? Do you have any data showing yes or no that wokeism, that all the programs that have been put in place in the last couple of years here on racism and extremism, et cetera, are negatively affecting or any way affecting recruiting and retention levels?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Kevin. As I'm sure you're going to appreciate, I'm not going to comment on anybody's particular election campaign, so thanks for the question.
That's fine.
All right,
Do you have any data, or are you studying this issue at all?
As it pertains to an individual's election campaign, no.
As it pertains to the recruiting difficulties the services have been reporting the last few
I think we've been very public in terms of the challenges that we face as a department in terms of recruiting, to include a lot of the reasons that we assess why that is, to include a propensity to serve, to include the recruiting age population. And so the department continues to work very, very hard, all the services do, to find ways to demonstrate to the American public that this is an attractive and great way of life. I mean, the opportunities that you get while serving in the military are unparalleled, no matter what walk of life you come from or what your background is. So I am confident that each of our services will continue to research that and look at it and find ways that we can connect with the public, because at the end of the day, this all-volunteer force needs volunteers, and it's essential to defending our country and our way of life. And I'm going to go to the next question. Ro.
Thank you very much. Two questions on North Korea. During the Secretary's phone call with the Japanese and South Korean counterpart this morning, did they discuss deployment of more U.S. military assets to the South Korea and Japan to reinforce deterrence? And secondly, do you still believe that denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is a realistic end goal of the U.S. policy on North Korea?
So denuclearization continues to be the policy, as we've said in the past. In terms of the phone call this morning, I think the readout that we provided the contours of the discussion, to include a discussion about the exercises that our two countries have conducted in the past and the exercise that we conducted today. Thank you. Qasim.
General, as the North Korean missile flew over Japan, apparently there was no engagement against the missile. Do you rule out that there was no engagement against the missile?
In terms of trying to intercept the missile? No.
And also, you mentioned that there was an exercise with Japan, and also you tried to characterize it as a way of a response to...
It was in response, correct. It was in...
It was a show of force? What was that really?
It was a demonstration of our commitment to working with one another and interoperability. Again, sending a message to the DPRK that the alliance between the United States, Japan, and the Republic of Korea is very, very strong, and that we are prepared to work together to deter any type of threats. So those were conducted in response to that launch.
Can I follow up on this, General, this topic?
I'll come back to you. I want to give other folks. Yes, sir.
Mike Press, the Washington Examiner. U.S. Africa Command said they launched a strike this weekend targeting al-Shabaab militants. It's the fourth strike since about mid-August. Could you give us an update about the situation on the ground there and if the threat from al-Shabaab is increasing?
So I'll talk in general terms. Really, I would encourage you to talk with AFRICOM, who can give you more of a deep dive. Clearly, al-Shabaab is a concerning organization, as an offshoot of ISIS, and we continue to work closely with the Somali government to try to train, advise, assist as they confront that threat to try to prevent it from spreading further. Clearly, these strikes are meant to try to prevent that from happening. We've all seen in the past what can happen when it does, and so we'll continue to work closely with Somalia on that. But I would recommend you contact AFRICOM. Okay, so let me go here, and then the back, and then I'll come back to Sylvie.
Thank
you,
sir. Thank you. Mohammed Mehdi with the Mayadeen Network. Regarding to the North Korea, General, are you willing to sit with the North Korea officials, and on what principles table for this talks if it's going to be held between the U.S. officials and North Korea?
In terms of diplomatic relations with North Korea, I think that's really a question for the State Department to address. Clearly, our focus as the Department of Defense is working with our partners and allies in the region to deter. And certainly, I think it goes without saying that any constructive, positive communication is welcome. Firing missiles is not a good way to do that. So, we would again ask them to stop with the destabilizing actions. And in the meantime, we will continue to be prepared to defend our allies. Let me go to the person behind you. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Erin with Kyoto.
Erin.
And how does the Pentagon assess North Korea's capabilities in terms of accuracy?
That's really a subjective question, right? So without knowing what particularly they were aiming at, and I really don't want to get into intelligence on that. So
the second time, though, it's gone over Japan, correct?
I'd have to double check, but I think that's right. But in terms of accuracy, if you're talking about precision guided capabilities and things like that, yeah, I don't have an assessment to provide for you. But thank you. Okay. Yes, ma'am. And then go to Sarah, and then I'll come back to you guys. Sorry.
Long-range ballistic missiles that are rumored that North Korea might be working on. Is there any update on that?
I don't have any updates. Thank you.
Any worry about that program that's escalated?
Again, the issue here is North Korea's behavior and the destabilizing impact that it has on the region. And so that, of course, is concerning to everyone. Yes, sir. We'll go here, and then I'm going to go to Sylvie.
Thank you, sir. I am curious on how seriously the U.S. government is taking the most recent missile launch. I mean, it flew 4,600 kilometers, which is long enough to strike Guam. More development could allow it to maybe hit Hawaii, Alaska, possibly the West Coast. Has there been a change in U.S. strategy due to this launch on how to react, how to handle these missile launches from the DPRK?
Well, I think we're taking it very seriously, as evidenced by the fact that, again, we conducted 2 bilateral exercises with the Republic of Korea and with Japan shortly after the launch. And also, you saw the series of communications between, not only senior leaders throughout the U.S. government, but Secretary Austin talking to his counterparts in Korea and in Japan. Thank you. Sylvie.
Yes, thank you. Can you confirm that the Secretary has decided to deploy the aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan in the Japan Sea in response to the missile launch?
So as you know, the Reagan was in South Korea. It's departed. In terms of its future movements, I'm not going to talk about that, but when and if we have anything to announce on that, we'll certainly be sure to do that. Okay. Let me go to the phone real quick, Tom. Let me go to Hyun Kim from Yonhap. Hyun, are you there? Okay. Heather Mongilio from USNI.
I was actually wondering if you can talk a little bit about the Secretary's meeting when he went to Red Hill. I saw that the Department of Defense released a new supplement to the plan that's now looking at a reduced timeline of 30 days instead of 120 days for defueling, as if that is a possibility. And I was wondering if you had any comments on whether this is something that the department is pursuing seriously.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. So as you highlight, the Secretary did visit Joint Task Force Red Hill this last week when he was in Hawaii. He had the opportunity also to visit the bulk storage facility and meet with the Indo-PACOM commander and with the Joint Task Force Red Hill commander, Rear Admiral Wade. And as part of those discussions, the emphasis on defueling this facility as swiftly as possible was a key aspect of the discussions, as well as doing it as safely as possible. Rear Admiral Wade has taken command of JTF Red Hill. I know that he and his team are working very hard toward that end, and certainly they're going to work it, again, as fast as they can, but just as importantly, as safely as they can, given the environmental and community impacts. Thank you. Okay. back to you, and then to you, Tom, and then to Fadi, and then we're going to start to wrap it up.
Okay. I wanted to follow up on the wokeism question and kind of the cultural wars going on around the military, specifically transgender service. That was granted, and then it was reversed, and then that reversal was reversed again, and now we have open service. But advocates say that there should be a law that enshrines the ability for transgender people to serve in the military, because it could be potentially reversed again by another administration. Does the Pentagon believe that a law is needed to protect service by those troops?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Again, I'm not going to talk about or speculate about potential legislation. That's the role of Congress and our elected leaders. Our job in the Department of Defense is to implement the policies that we have, and we continue to implement those policies.
What would you say to transgender troops who feel a certain amount of insecurity and, you know, the future may feel uncertain to them?
What would I say to transgender troops as a U.S. Air Force officer currently serving in the Department of Defense is that if you're wearing the uniform and you're next to me and we're going to fight together. And you're my teammate and I'm your teammate. Okay. Tom.
Thanks, Pat. When the Secretary announced the extremism program and there was a stand down earlier this year, then press spokesperson John Kirby said the new regulations permit DOD to investigate possibilities of extremism in ranks when the information came forward through various media or other ways. As you know, we talked a couple weeks ago how at least 110 members of the military were identified in report by the ADL of having possible links to the Oath Keepers. And I'm wondering what step, that was 2 weeks ago, and that's come to light. What steps, if any, has DOD taken to begin to investigate these individuals who were cited in this report?
Yeah, I don't have any specifics in terms of individual cases, right? But what I would say writ large is, again, we have clear guidelines and policy on what is and is not acceptable behavior within the Department of Defense. And if you violate those policies or those guidelines, or there's a reason to investigate, we will, and we'll take appropriate action.
On those? I mean,
again, I don't have any information on individual cases that you're talking about.
Okay. 110 names are out there, sir. That's why.
So I would recommend you contact the individual services, and they may be able to provide you with additional details, because depending on the agency, that would be the responsible agency for investigating. Thanks. Okay, Tony, and then I'm going to do one more from the phone.
Thanks. While Afghanistan is out of everybody's mind, there's still a classified after-action report. Can you check the status of that and when the Secretary is going to be able to release it, an unclassified summary?
Yeah, and just to, yes, I can do that.
And we're 6 months into the Ukraine invasion by Russia. Is there any attempt to name the U.S. and NATO operation to arm the Ukrainians?
At this time, I'm not aware that there's any request to formally name the operation.
Interesting. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Fadi, last one.
General again, yeah. So these two exercises in response to the missile launch by North Korea, can you explain to us the significance of using the JDAM with South Korea? What kind of message are you sending with using those? And how exercise with fighter jets is relevant to missile launch? I mean, how do you defend that? And a separate topic, the Secretary spoke with his Saudi counterpart. Do you have anything on that? Thank you.
So we will issue a readout on the phone call, and thanks for mentioning that. I should have mentioned that in my topper. In terms of fighter aircraft, in terms of any type of exercises that we conduct, again, it demonstrates the full range of capabilities that we have. But I think if you look at the forest through the trees here, it's the fact that our militaries can work together across multiple different types of platforms, capabilities, environments, that we can fly together, we can fight together, and that are not even in the air, not just in the air, on the sea and on the land, that we have capabilities that enable us to integrate and synchronize and to deter and defend. And so your question in terms of what's the significance of using JDAMs, as we have seen in multiple conflicts, the ability to conduct precision strike, to be able to strike a target that you want to strike when you want to strike it, is a distinct advantage on the battlefield. And so our militaries, in this case the Republic of Korea and in the United States military, the ability for them to fly together and to conduct precision strike, again, sends a clear message. So actually, I'm sorry, I got one person I did not call, John Turpak, Air and Space Force Magazine.
Thank you, General. The President, or the White House last night, issued a change to the Defense Production Act relative to the drawdown, relative to production of weapons. Can you talk about what some of the practical aspects are to that and how it directly or perhaps is separate from the Ukraine weapons announcements that were made earlier in your briefing?
Yeah, thanks, John. Unfortunately, I can't because I just don't know. So let me take that question and we'll get back to you on that one. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
It's secure. There's internet. Our cellular providers are providing internet here in addition to Starlink. And to speak about Starlink, Governor, as soon as you made that available, I contacted our urban search and rescue teams. Now, those men and women have touched 72,000 structures since the storm has hit. They're doing the hasty searches. They're going in and literally, you can go to my Facebook or Twitter page and you can see what they're doing. And they're going from building to building with chainsaws looking for people. But they have to have internet in order to report that data back. Governor, I'm proud to say, if it's not for Starlink right now at those sites, they told me it's a game changer. So thank you for doing that. 16 teams from around the United States have responded in urban search and rescue help on this. And it's these men and women are working tirelessly because they, look, sometimes there's bad news. But you know what they live for? I was sitting there, I was talking about it. I said, you know what they live for? They live for the life they save. They find people, and it's a game changer. It's nourishment to their soul. It makes them work that much harder. So the fact that they're doing this effort is, it's again, they're saving lives, and they're doing everything humanly possible. So pray for them, pray for their safety, and understand, if you have not talked to your loved one, look, communications are challenged. I know that is the one thing people are looking for. I want to know if mom or dad, if my grandparents are alive and safe. Promise you, as we get communication established, as these men and women are doing their job, we will reunite you with your loved ones. Now, this is the part I've been talking about coming up to the storm. I appreciate WFLA. Y'all are here. Y'all have helped us turn up the volume on this. Is the pre-event fraud. So as long as you try to listen and you do some preparation, you can be protected from the fraudsters. These fraudsters that come here, they're no different than looters, okay? Hear me. The fraudsters that come in are no different than looters. They're going to want to take advantage of you and your insurance policy. The governor and Kevin spoke to Operation Blue Tarp. That is a free service if you need a tarp. Do not let anybody make you pay for a blue tarp on your house. Okay, if they do, and somebody tries to extract dollars from you or say, hey, your insurance company's going to pay for it, run them off your property. That's illegal. That is a service that is free available to you. So you don't want to ever be taken advantage of by that. I tell people, if it's too good to be true, it is. Listen to your gut. If somebody's being too nice to you, run them off your property because they're trying to take advantage of you. These insurance companies here, you know why they're here? They're here to write you a check. Okay, they're here to close claims. They're here to do advance payments. So look, you don't need to go call anybody other than your insurance agent, your carrier, most of them are here, or my office, 1-877-MY-FLCFO. If you're calling one of those three for your first phone call, I promise you, there's no chance of being taken advantage of. And then if you have a problem with your carrier, there's dysfunction, lack of communication, you call me. That's what we do. That's why you pay us. We are paid break through the monotony, the challenges, the communication barriers, the overwhelming stress you're dealing with right now. Hurricane Michael leveled my hometown of Panama City. This is no different. It's just a much bigger scale. So we know how to fix what you're dealing with right now. So again, these carriers here, when you show up, they will help you piece together your claim. In most cases, you're going to walk away with a check to go put a roof over your head so that adjuster can get out to your property, assess the damages, and start the claims process. And look, just because you may get a check that may not be exactly what you're looking for, you know what you can do? You reopen the claim. It's not that hard, folks. I promise you. We are here till you're made whole. So again, please, if it sounds good, too good to be true, don't take the bait. There's a lot of really bad people out there that want to take advantage of some really vulnerable folks. In the state of Florida, we're here united, and we've got an amazing governor that's holding us together. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I will just put it, look, it's not going to be for me, but for everybody. You know, I'm putting in a plug that the Chick-fil-A van come to the DRC here, help people. You know, we also had Culver's, all these others, so they all can come as well. We'd love to have them. But I appreciate the effort in getting this stood up so quickly, because we understand that people have questions, have needs. A lot of people have registered, and there has been money dispersed already by FEMA, by the First Lady, with some of the charities for sure. But this is important to be able to do. We've got a lot more work to do. But I'll tell you, I've been working with Jimmy in the aftermath of Michael, which happened right before I became governor. You know, it's not an easy thing, and in some ways, Michael was like a sledge. Anywhere in that path was, you know, as bad as anything, you know, you see. And it took a lot of effort, and there's still effort that's going on. But I'll tell you, they bounced back. I mean, there's a lot that's going on that's great. People want to be there. People understand it's a great community. And that's what's going to happen here. It will definitely happen here. I think it's going to happen a lot quicker than some people may think, but it will happen. So in any event, yes.
I know the state response has been massive, Governor, especially on the barrier islands. We saw that firsthand today. The question is about property insurance. People have damage, and they are filing claims right now. Can you assure those storm victims that those claims are going to be paid out because the insurance companies don't?
Well, I think that, Jimmy, you want to take about, you know, we have obviously layers of coverage and cat fund and everything like that.
There's multiple redundancies in the state of Florida. We have known since we learned a lot through Hurricane Andrew. So the cat fund exists, FIGA exists. We create a number of redundancies. That's why David Altmaier's boots on the ground here, where we have to educate and explain. That's exactly what we do. So the state of Florida, thank God we're in the best fiscal health we've ever been in case we have to make some type of a fiscal audible call. But again, we have built to prepare for storms like this. But I can't stress enough, a claim, an insurance policy has a set amount of value. Call it $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, whatever your policy is what you purchase. If you allow predators to get between you and that claims process, you are giving away dollars you're entitled to. Okay, so all I want to do is make people as whole as quick as possible. And let me just reassure you, when a claim is filed, just because maybe the expenses, maybe you discovered 3 months later you've got problems in your house that are water related that you didn't know were there because, you know what, you're overwhelmed, and you know what, you're not a contractor. You reopen the claim. It's as simple as that. So there's good solutions there, but again, the governor's leadership to make sure that the state has the fiscal health is the best thing that we've got going for us.
Yeah, and our cat fund, I think, has never been this high. Has it ever been? Yeah, so we have the highest cat fund, so obviously that's another layer of redundancy. We also, in the special session, we probably would have had companies go out of business this summer. I called the legislature in the special session. One of the things we did was create, we call it the WRAP program, which also provides additional coverage. Some of these companies, I think there may be some problematic. A lot of these big companies, you know, I think you should feel pretty comfortable. I mean, these are big companies. Now, I know there was an effort 15 years ago to drive a lot of companies out of Florida. That was a huge mistake that we're still paying for to this day. Nevertheless, we have taken action to stabilize, and we will do more if we need to. I mean, I will call another special session, but I think it's premature to know kind of exactly, because there is wind damage, there's no question, but I've toured up and down the state, and I would say the flood far exceeds the wind damage in terms of what I'm seeing. I mean, you know, you're going like Cape Coral, I'm driving through these neighborhoods. Honestly, you wouldn't even know because like unless they're standing water, that the structure looks fine. But then they had 4 feet of water like 3 days ago, whenever storm. So that's the issue. So I think it's going to be a combination, but I think it's going to be probably more of a flood event, whereas like Hurricane Michael was almost entirely a wind event because it was a buzzsaw that was ripping through. Yes, sir.
Governor, great news for Sanibel and Pine Island. I know people watching are probably going to ask, is there any guesstimate as to when they may be able to get back on the island?
Pine Island's bridge will be done this week. So that will be open to traffic. It'll be open to commerce. It'll be open to a lot of the first responders. I mean, we're bringing them in by helicopter and boat, but it's much easier. I mean, we dumped ATVs on the Chinooks. We brought ATVs with linemen, and now they're going around, buzzing around the island, inspecting the electrical damage, which is fine. We're happy to do it. But how much easier it's going to be when they just take their trucks right on. So that is absolutely going to happen this week. And I just met with Publix there while we were out there. Publix will open as soon as the bridge is open. Publix will open. So they're going to have Publix. Some of these gas stations I saw there, there's this beautiful 7-Eleven. Like, honestly, if you didn't see anything else on Pine Island, you would not have known there was a storm. It's like such nice construction and everything. And it's closed because I don't think they have adequate power. So we can, Kevin can help. We told the residents, generators, all this stuff, get some of these things up, I think is important. The power situation, we want to surge linemen there. Now, obviously, the FPL and the co-op, they focused on the non-barrier islands because the damage was a little less extensive. So that's understandable, and if you get all that up. But again, we believe in working in parallel. They're doing that now. More people are coming online in some of these areas. I think there's a lot more work to do in Cape Coral, some of the others. But let's also work on whatever reconstruction needs to happen on these islands. I mean, why wait a month before you even get in there? So we're basically reconnecting the islands to the mainland, both with that bridge, the Sanibel Bridge. I cannot tell you when the temporary bridge for Sanibel will be done because I don't have there's someone's going to win the bid. They're going to have a proposal. But basically, the good news about Sanibel is that where it was severed was on land, basically. There's a sandbar where you can probably fortify, but then it's the rest. The places in the water, those poles held, and they look really good. You wouldn't know even there was a storm just looking there. So I think we'll be able to have a solution there, hopefully in the not-too-distant future. But you got seasonal residents. You got people that want to come back and look at their property. You got other folks. I mean, if you have transport and you can get some handle on what it's going to take for the electrical, that's a huge, huge thing. So we think it's very, very important. And other barrier islands, too. I mean, Kevin's talking about putting that C2 element on these other barrier islands, and we want to definitely do that. Yes, sir.
Calling on LCEC to accept that mutual aid. Are you satisfied with their response?
Let Kevin take that. I mean, I think for me, when I told him, I said, I don't want bureaucracy. I don't want complaints about who's going to pick up the cost share. Just do it, because I saw that you had this massive community where almost nobody had power, 3 or 4 days after the storm, and we needed to do better. So that was one of the main reasons why we've surged. So Kevin, you want to go over that?
Yeah, I talked to Melissa last night when we did the press conference from Duke Energy. I've talked to a couple other of our big power electric companies, FPL and so on. Again, I think one of the biggest issues is, again, and I say this publicly, FPL, Duke, TO, these private sector utilities, municipal electrical utilities, people that have individuals that are done with your stuff. The governor's pleaded with you, do not leave. Get involved in the fight. Coordinate with us so that we can coordinate with Lee Cooperative, and then that bill's coming to us at the division, and we're going to pay it. FPL and so on. Again, I think one of the biggest issues is, again, and I say this publicly, FPL, Duke, TECO, these private sector utilities, municipal electrical utilities, people that have individuals that are done with your stuff. The governor's pleaded with you, do not leave, get involved in the fight, coordinate with us so that we can coordinate with Lee Cooperative, and then that bill's coming to us at the division, and we're going to pay it. So it is, we've already got 4,500 or so in the fight now. I intend to, the governor said he wants to see a lineman on every block. I'm going to put a lineman on every block. All right, that's going to happen. You won't be able to go out your front door in Cape Coral without seeing a lineman very quickly.
But you know, the thing about, you know, we did the event yesterday in Cape Coral. We're coming in, and there's power lines that you have to dodge just to get back to where we were going at the pier. And so that needs attention now, and that's just going to require manpower. It's going to require bodies, and so that's what we're doing.
Governor, President Biden is visiting tomorrow. You're set to meet with him. What are you hoping comes from that meeting? Is the federal government doing about?
So if there's any request, I'm going to talk with Kevin about it tonight, figure out where we are. If there's more that FEMA can do, we will put that in. But I will say, we did one of the earliest emergency declarations. The storm was a disturbance when we did it. The next day, FEMA, the White House through FEMA approved our pre-landfall declaration. So that was huge because everyone was full steam ahead. They knew they had the ability to do it. And then they've done category A and B. So we appreciate, I think FEMA's worked very well with the state and local, and we want to continue to do it and have all hands on deck.
Governor,
I don't know if I think he's going to maybe tour the air. I don't know if I'm going to do that, but I know I'm going to have a briefing with him, and we are going to meet.
Governor, when we go out to the issue of immigration, there are Venezuelan immigrants, asylum seekers in New York that are being recruited to come to the state of Florida and work on hurricane recovery. I'm wondering what your response is to those reports and whether you would turn them away.
So, first of all, our program that we did is a voluntary relocation program. I don't have the authority to forcibly relocate people. If I could, you know, I would take those 3 looters, I'd drag them out by the collars, and I'd send them back to where they came from. But that's a federal government, unfortunately. That's the federal government's view. I think states should be able to be more active in that regard. Unfortunately, states have lost court decision after court decision on that. So that's just kind of where we are. But I do think that what has happened by having massive numbers of people coming across the border has not been good for this country. I had to go, and I met at the EOC. We're planning out yesterday, and then I leave that. And I didn't come here. I had to go to Tampa. Why? Because there was a memorial service for a Pinellas County Sheriff's deputy who got killed by a twice deported illegal alien from Central America. Someone was operating heavy machinery, was not eligible to work and had fraudulent documents, did not have the proper license, and ran over our deputy. How is that something that should be acceptable? I mean, it just shows you we don't have rule of law throughout this entire. We have it in Florida, I'll tell you that, but we don't have it. We don't have it throughout our country, and I think it's been really problematic. And to see somebody look. The way I view having the border like it is, you know, you have a criminal alien come across and then end up in a situation where someone gets killed. We can say without a shadow of a doubt, had you just had control of your border, that wouldn't have happened. And that's why they're very preventable crimes. And so it was sad that happened. It was really sad to have to see somebody buried. Well, actually, they're going to bury him in Arlington Cemetery because he's a veteran. But it was just really sad. And I'm talking to his mother, and it's like, you know, why did this have to happen? So it's really, really sad, the situation that our country finds itself in with respect to our open border. Okay, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.